Everybody that's watching right now, pause this thing. And I want you to go write your eulogy. Now, if you're going to do that, here's what you have to decide. Number one, I want you to determine who's going to read it. Number two, I want you to write it in their voice. Then push pause and go do it. Okay, welcome back to the show. Here's the good news. You've now written your eulogy. So I want you now to push pause again, and I want you to read it out loud. Go. Perfect. Welcome back. Now, I want you to simply write down whichever human you had that you just wrote that for, that you just read it in their voice. I want you to write down what your interaction with that person was yesterday. What did you do with that person yesterday? And some of you are going to say, I didn't even see that person yesterday. Some of you are going to say, I was an ass yesterday. Some of you are going to say, I was pretty average yesterday. And a handful of you are going to say, yesterday, it's such a fluke, we were at Disney. Here's the deal. Who you want to be in the end has nothing to do with who you want to be in the end. It's how you showed up yesterday. That's how you're going to be remembered in the end. It's how you show up today is how you're going to be remembered in the end. It's tomorrow is how you're going to be remembered in the end. As soon as it's not esoteric anymore for you and it's real, think of it this way. Death is this idea that is so difficult to hold on to until you're told you have 3 weeks until it happens.
Yeah.
I've just made your eulogy real for you. Now go forth and live like that.
Good morning. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, in doing some research, right, it's really clear that you have had just about every job in the real estate industry. You've been an agent, you've had a team, you've owned a team, you've had expansion, and you're now the head of industry and learning. I want to make sure I get your title right at KW. But I'm curious. You've had all of these seats, and so from your perspective and your background, you've seen a lot of people set big goals, right? You've seen a lot of people define happiness through the success of their real estate business, and recently I've heard you talk about that a little bit more. And just wondering if you could, maybe we could start with a conversation around how you see happiness, fulfillment, goal setting, and success in light of what's a changing and competitive industry. It's sort of an uncertain moment in time. How should agents be thinking about happiness and fulfillment in this industry right now if you were coaching them?
Well, I'll give you Gary's answer. I find that his answers are mostly better than mine. So he wrote the book, The One Thing, and if you remember that book, I think it's page 127. Is that right? Don't worry, I don't charge by the minute, so just hang on a second. Anyway, 114. So on page 114, he has these circles. Now, these were the circles that he says are the most important things in his life, and I'll just remind everybody. This goes clockwise, and it starts with the most important, right, in his life. So spirituality, physical health, which, by the way, we've changed that to just health now because I think mental health fits into that bucket. Personal life, key relationships, job, business, finances. So you have this circle. So the question is, do you know what you want to accomplish in each of those circles? That's it. Do you know? And if you don't know, by the way, congratulations, you're like most. If you do know, then just understand it's an ever-evolving conversation. And so if you take those 7 circles and then you draw a giant circle around it, that giant circle would be called happiness. And that's how I think about it, which is to say that you will constantly be unhappy if the main pillars of your life are undefined. And there are some folks that come out early in life and they're thinkers and they're journeyers and they kind of create these frameworks like Gary did in his 20s. And then there's other people like me that are a complete catastrophe in their 40s, like still trying to figure it all out. And that's okay. Everyone is on their own unique journey. And so happiness is the intersection of all of those things, knowing where you want to go and then making peace with the journey to get there.
not being there,
You'll never
but
get
knowing where you want to go.
You're not going to get
Yeah.
there. Because here's the thing, right? Anything that would be worthy of you in a bucket like spirituality, like spoiler alert, you're not going to arrive. Like that wouldn't be worthy of you probably. And the same goes with most of them. Now you could look up and say, well, wait a minute, though, that's not right. I know where I want my business to get to. I want to build it and I want to sell it and I want to have this big cash event. Maybe that's what you're thinking. Or I want to get to this certain level of my business so it makes X amount of dollars. Great. Some of them are a little easier to tick off and say, arrived. The majority of life, though, isn't. So if you think of happiness as kind of multidimensional, you end up with these buckets. And the first bucket is kind of conditional happiness, which is I'll be happy when. Now, you shouldn't discount it. Like those of you that are like, well, that's not real happiness, you're wrong. That's actually real happiness. It's the easiest one to create. It's 100% in your control because you get to decide the when. So you could say, I'll be happy when I have a $400 million yacht. That one's going to be tougher than I'll be happy when I get the turkey chili at lunch today. It's the exact same conditional happiness. I'll be happy when I meet the right person. I'll be happy when I get rid of the wrong person. I'll be happy when I make a bunch of money. I'll be happy when I don't need a bunch of money. Like, it's I'll be happy when.
When.
Here are the pros and cons. Number one, easiest to get. Con, most fleeting. Anyone that's ever owned a brand new car that you thought your life was going to change because you had it knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's fleeting. Then you have this second bucket of happiness, which I kind of think of it like disposition. Like I have a happy disposition. Remember, happiness is a choice. It's a gift you give yourself. So I choose to be happy. It doesn't matter what's going on around me. That doesn't mean I'm happy with every circumstance. Like, God forbid, you lose a family member. I'm not suggesting you're happy because mom died. But I am suggesting that it's a terrible thing and you're sad, but you still choose to be a happy person. How that shows up daily for you is the manifestation of your definition of happiness. But make no mistake about it, it's a choice. This is why you can see, like in the book, The Happiest Man on Earth, right, by Eddie Jaku. This is a dude who's literally in a concentration camp. In Auschwitz, like fighting for his survival, and then writes a book on how to be the happiest person in the world. Here's what he says. There's always miracles in the world, even when all seems hopeless. And when there are no miracles, you can simply make them happen. With a simple act of kindness, you can save another person from despair, and that just might save their life. This is the greatest miracle of all. So he's suggesting that you can make this choice. And then the final bucket is in the end, which, just spoiler alert, we're all going to die.
What?
Yeah, I know. Shocking. And so, there's only a handful of billionaires out there that don't agree with that.
That's right.
But we are. And so the question is, in the end, when you look back on your life, will you be happy with it? And we know from books like, The Regrets of the Dying, which was written by a hospice nurse, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, we know the number one regret. You don't have to wonder what it will be. The research has been done. The number one regret of the dying is that people didn't live their life. They let other people make their decisions. They stayed in jobs they didn't like. They stayed in relationships they wanted to get out of. They didn't chase dreams that they had. They literally did things for others in lieu of living the life that they wanted. And in the last moments of it, you look up and you realize that. It's very difficult to be happy with that life. So now I'll tie all of this back together. You have to know what's important to you. Those 7 circles are a great place to start. That's what was important to Gary. You may have 4. You may have 12. You're going to have what you have. Knowing what you want out of those things and then having some model by which to accomplish it allows you to draw a big circle around it marked happiness. And then simply making peace with the process, which is every day I'm going to choose to be happy. And every day it's a fight to make the choice.
Yeah. So reconcile something for me, and I don't know that I've ever asked this question before. As an industry, we reward a very specific narrow set of measures around happiness, right? Production and units and money and things like that's what the plastic trophies are for, right? So how would you suggest we balance those things?
I think
Right? We're in an industry that defines it very specifically, success.
Yes. I don't think this. I think I don't think this is who we are. I think this is what we do to make money.
Right.
I think what we do with the money and ultimately our time is who we are. And so I think one of the mistakes that real estate agents make, predominantly because this is a contact sport in more ways than one, and because it's this whirlwind that takes on its own personality, and it could be all encompassing if you let it. We wake up, and after a period of time, this is who we are. I am realtor man. Like, this is who we are, and it isn't. This is what we do to make money. What we do with that money, what we do with our time, that's who we are. And so, the MREA podcast, which I'm really proud of, I really enjoy doing it. One of my biggest ahas is that these are the most successful people in the industry, and when you listen to them speak, the very few of them talk about their units and transaction volume. I'm not making any judgment on the ones that do. I'm just suggesting that very few of them do. And I think the greatest conversation on this is the Gino Wickman episode of that show. If you haven't listened to it, I would urge you to go do it. Gino Wickman inherits that business from Floyd Wickman, if you're old enough to remember Sweat Hogs in our industry. And he grows EOS, which is his business operating system, talked about in the book Traction and Rocket Fuel and Entrepreneurial Leap. He grows that into this giant business. They're powering over 200,000 businesses worldwide. He looks up and sells that business in his 50s. He has untold riches that come his way. Wakes up the next day realizing, I'm not happy, which is his new book that came out last week, which, and if you're watching this, it's evergreen. Now we're at the beginning of April of 24. His new book, Shine, is literally, here are the 10 ways to be happy as soon as you realize that money's not going to make you happy. That's why I went out and I did that interview with him on this very topic.
Yeah. I think that's a great distinction that we don't make enough, right? We are, this is what we do, not who we are. And ask that question, who am I? Work on that question to the same degree that you work on being a great realtor, right? Building a great business. Now you've got it bookended. Yeah.
Absolutely. And be cognizant of the fact that who you want to be isn't as esoteric as it sounds. Meaning, in the end, when you look back on your life, let's play the game. Everybody that's watching right now, pause this thing. And I want you to go write your eulogy. Now, if you're going to do that, here's what you have to decide. Number one, I want you to determine who's going to read it. Number two, I want you to write it in their voice. Then push pause and go do it. Okay, welcome back to the show. Here's the good news. You've now written your eulogy. So I want you now to push pause again, and I want you to read it out loud. Go. Perfect. Welcome back. Now, I want you to simply write down whichever human you had that you just wrote that for, that you just read it in their voice. I want you to write down what your interaction with that person was yesterday. What did you do with that person yesterday? And some of you are going to say, I didn't even see that person yesterday. Some of you are going to say, I was an ass yesterday. Some of you are going to say, I was pretty average yesterday. And a handful of you are going to say, yesterday, it's such a fluke, we were at Disney. Here's the deal. Who you want to be in the end has nothing to do with who you want to be in the end. It's how you showed up yesterday. That's how you're going to be remembered in the end. It's how you show up today is how you're going to be remembered in the end. It's tomorrow is how you're going to be remembered in the end. As soon as it's not esoteric anymore for you and it's real, think of it this way. Death is this idea that is so difficult to hold on to until you're told you have 3 weeks until it happens.
Yeah.
I've just made your eulogy real for you. Now go forth and live likewise.
Yeah.
We didn't know this was going to be an interactive episode, so
this is so
I like
good.
it. This is
fantastic. What a great twist. I've heard that question before, Jason. I've never heard the piece that you said very clearly. Write it in their voice. Right, because I think a lot of people write, they say, okay, I get it, I'll write my eulogy, but you still write it in your voice. You write it the way you want, like that's a hagiography, like it's a memorial, it's not a eulogy. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And then the idea that it's literally not how you want it to be unless you make it that way. I gave a speech on this not so long ago. There was a gentleman in the audience named Steve Gendel. He's a regional guy, regional RTTs and OPs, a great guy. he lost his son. His son was born with all sorts of challenges. He lost his son in his 20s. No parent should have to go through that. It's very, very difficult. But here's what he said to me. He came up after and said, you should write a eulogy for your son. And no one had mentioned that. I'd never even thought of that. And I said, dude, I don't even know emotionally if I can do that. He said, well, here's the problem with it. Your son's going to get what he gets. But if you went and wrote the eulogy for him, would you show up differently for him tomorrow? I had never thought of that before. It's a very difficult thing to do, but every parent might want to look up. And here's the deal. You have like 83% of the time you're going to spend with your child by the time they're 18. Because if you actually do the math backwards and say, okay, well, then they go away to college. How often do you see them? And then if they live in the same state, what do you see them? Twice a month for Sunday dinner? If you're lucky, maybe 5 or 6 times a month. When you start to add up the hours, you realize no matter what, you're about 83% done with the time you're going to spend with them by the time they're 18. Now look up and ask me if you had time to take that phone call instead of going to the arcade.
This is also what Ryan Holiday and Stoicism talks about, right? The memento mori, where he said he'll sit there watching his kid asleep and he'll sit there and think about if he died, and so he's like, he plays the mental exercise of if he died, what would this be like? Because then it twists that into, okay, we have to maximize the time we actually have because that's going to be awful. Right.
Which is so interesting because, Ryan found a way to take thoughts that were written 1,640 years ago and make them
present,
which makes Ryan like the absolute genius in the room. But having spent time with him, here's what I can tell you. The reason that you find all the things that he says to be so enlightening, which is the repeating of Aristotle and the rest of the Stoics, is these were built on universal truths. If you spent enough time thinking about your life right now, completely unplugged, you'd come to a lot of the same conclusions. But why would you do that when this whole group of people already did it? Life has not changed that much in the last 1,600 years.
Yeah, technology has, life hasn't.
Yeah. Well, by the way, the industry hasn't changed that much in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
In the same ilk.
Yeah. Call more people.
Exactly.
Talk to more people. You're fine.
Yeah. You mentioned the industry, and I do want to pivot there maybe a little bit. Right now, the industry is going through a moment of, feels like anyway, a moment of change and sort of transition. From your seat on the bus, where do you see real estate 18, 36, months from now, 5 years from now? Is it going to look the way it looks today? Is it going to look different, or do we not know?
I think you'll have more realtors than ever before in history. And I think I kind of think of it more as an awakening than a change. And I read some blog somewhere. All of a sudden, blogs are now news. It's the cutest thing. And someone said, this is a revolution. And I was thinking, this is not a revolution. This is an evolution. And adaptation is one of the most healthy things and natural things. You walk around in the natural world and you see a constant movement towards adaptation in everything that you see, all the way from animals to trees to weather. It's constantly adapting. And you realize that adaptation is literally the process of life. And then the minute somebody asks you to adapt something that you think you're in control of, you're like, oh, hell, we can't. The world's coming to an end. That's the craziest thing. And I think that comes from this idea that you are actually in control of things. And so I don't want it to get dark as 1,000 midnights, but I just want to remind everyone out there that wakes up every day on the zeal for control. You wake up every day, whether you realize it or not, and you intend to exert your abilities to control more outcomes. You're trying to control people, and you do that through giving love and withholding it. You do it through conversations and not having them. You literally try to control environments. You call it air conditioning. I call it the weather. You control the lights. You're controlling everything. And the more money you have, the more experiences in life that you get to control. But I just want to remind everybody, in the whole cosmic scheme of things, you're not in control of anything, and you are wildly unimportant. You're this little thing on this big planet with 8 billion other little things just like you. And the planet is 73% covered in water, meaning it's pretty undiscoverable to you. So you literally adapt in this very small area that's usually about 7 miles wide. That planet that you're on, spinning around on this rock in the middle of the atmosphere and solar system, is surrounded by, I don't know, 200 billion other universes in an infinite amount of space. They can't even define it. Your brain could not rationalize or define the amount of space that's above you. There'd be no way to explain it to you. Mm-hmm. And yet, you wake up every day on this zeal for control. And when someone makes a change that you feel puts you in less control, your body reacts and your brain reacts. And the media jumps in. And all of a sudden, the media knows how many transactions we're going to do and at what price. And then how many agents there are going to be. Like, is everyone out of their mind all of a sudden? And you consume this as a diet of information. And so let me just level set. Anybody that tells you that they know what's going to happen is lying. So when you ask someone for their opinion, which is what we're all pontificating, I just want you to know it should have no bearing on anybody's life out there. That said, since 1891, real estate professionals have been protecting and creating the equity on Main Street, which now is about $32 trillion. Not Wall Street, Main Street. And so the fact that it all just sits there inside of residential real estate, the media and a bunch of lawyers might have you believe that that's just dumb luck. It's actually because the real estate agent has been the protector. They've been the shining knight on the hill for the entire wealth movement, which revolves around home ownership in this country. And yeah, leasing a piece of America is great, but owning it is a hell of a lot better. And that's what we wake up and do every day. So here's what I believe. You got more people than ever? Would we agree on that?
Mm-hmm.
Great. You're probably going to have more of them tomorrow. You got people from all over the world that want to come into these countries, and this country specifically, and that want to start a life here. It turns out, because of Maslow and his hierarchy, they're going to want to live somewhere. And here's what I know. People that want things find people to purvey those things. We purvey dreams. So I think you're going to have more real estate agents than ever, helping more buyers and sellers than ever consummate their transactions. That's what I believe.
Working in a slightly adjusted environment, but that's best. Yeah.
All we're talking about, and I don't want to understate it because I know that, change is change and adaptation is adaptation, and it still requires our absolute fiduciary diligence and understanding. And yeah, we got to come up with models and systems to capitalize on it in the name of the consumer. But last I checked, there were a few things that were just universally true. Number one, I can't find a single poll that says that consumers don't like real estate agents. They love the services we're providing, and they happen to like you people as people. Number two, everyone always wants everything cheaper. These are universal truths that can't be disputed. All you're seeing is them coming together.
Yeah.
And I have absolutely no fear of that. And neither should you. You know why? Because in 2020, your entire industry was deemed to be absolutely irreplaceable and necessary to the extent where you people were allowed to go out and work while other people were asked to stay at home.
It's a good point. Like one of very few professions that were told, okay, go out and do work.
I saw real estate agents delivering masks. I saw real estate agents doing care calls at scale. Show me the under industry that did care calls at scale. Hi, do you need anything? And I don't want to offend any of our first responders out there because I'm a huge first responder fan. But I will tell you this. I think real estate agents oftentimes play the role of first responder. They're the first person that does care calls. They're the first group that people call when their lives are changing dramatically. And the vast majority of consultative conversations that we as an industry have, we do it with absolutely no expectation of sending a bill. We do it to help people. You go try to have a 2-hour conversation with your attorney about life and finance and see if you don't get an invoice.
We played that game the other day of what if we charge the same an attorney might, or even close on an hourly, and build the same way of saying rounding up to every 6th minute to a 10th of an hour, rounding to every 10th of an hour. And all of a sudden the 8 open houses that we did to sell the last house, we were at $2,500 and all we had done was open houses. We hadn't even touched a contract.
Yeah, and that you make a great point. And we're not trying to knock attorneys. We're not trying
not at all. They're great.
All I'm simply saying is this idea that you're suddenly going to have less first responding real estate agents simply because there was a rule change seems stupid to me. Here's the thing. The number of real estate agents was never tied to any rule. The number of real estate agents is tied directly to the number of people that want to buy and sell real estate. And that number, I think, gets higher every day. And a lot of it is based on the interest rates. You went from 6 million sales to 4 million. It is coming back, you know. Every time we crest to a new high, that becomes the floor of the next boom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit just on that point, on the industry coming back. I wonder if the skill set will be different. What I mean specifically is we've heard a lot of conversations around like the idea of listing buyers and having, you know, better upfront, stronger conversations. And at least previously, like the skill set of those folks that were buyer focused was often viewed as different, or maybe been slightly different from the skill set of folks that worked with sellers.
Sure.
Do you see a convergence there if we're going to go list buyers?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, 42%, based on at least NAR's data, was using a buyer's agency agreement prior to all of this hullabaloo. And remember, buyer's agency didn't come in to even be a thing until 1992. It was based on a survey done in '83 by the Federal Trade Commission that said buyers thought that subagents of the seller were actually representing them. And it was real estate agents that looked up and self-corrected the industry and said, we totally get it. We're the ones that opened the door. Let's do buyer's agency. So I know I'm coming around to answering your question, but it's important to have perspective. Yeah. So right now, you got a bunch of people saying, okay, the buyer side is now a skill-based business. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Helping somebody move through all of the stages of buying and then buying remorse and then closing has always been laced with skill.
Yeah.
The difference now is the order by which conversations need to happen. And so the skill that's changing is a lot of the discussions that may have happened in the fourth quarter of the game need to happen before the game even starts. And that's a healthy thing, and that's a transparent thing. And that's going to move the entire industry ahead. And so is it a new skill? I don't know. I think the words that you say that move people into action faster with you than without you has always been the skill. You're just now going to have to use your skills a little differently.
Application of the same skill at a different time. Sorry.
And in Value Squared, you talk about the two charts, functionary and fiduciary, right? The main difference that I got out of that was proactive and reactive. And so if we're just shifting, and not saying that we weren't already working as fiduciaries, but if we focus more on that, we're just becoming more proactive. And I like that analogy of saying, quit talking about this at the fourth quarter, bring it up before the game even starts. Like that's all it is reordering of the items we were doing through a buyer transaction. That's all it is.
I think that's right. And I totally get why a lot of the prop tech companies and the quote unquote disruptors, I get why this conversation makes them very uncomfortable because they've all been building the functionary tasks into technology and then labeling it fiduciary. And it's total horseshit. That's just not what any of it is. There is absolutely no replacing a highly functioning fiduciary agent. Just like I wouldn't make the argument that LegalZoom replaces the person who defends you in court if, gosh forbid, you get convicted of a felony. Yeah. And anyone that says it does, you're just wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
And
that's
so,
a good question, Your Honor. Let me go to my computer.
Yeah. That's why I have no actual fear around this. And the only fear that I have, that's not true. I do have one set. I fear that you have really well-intentioned, great real estate people waking up every day and their heart is troubled. Because in times of uncertainty, it's hard to be certain. And I fear for them. Not because I think it'll harm them, but because the focus that they spend on that, as opposed to on the things that make their life good, will negatively affect them. I just will. It's my only fear. As far as the industry goes, full steam ahead. As far as fiduciary goes, you will always be paid as a fiduciary if you behave like one. And as far as units and transaction goes, I think you're about to see some of the greatest years the real estate business has ever seen because you have all this pent-up demand from the COVID time that thought they missed out when rates got higher. Rates go up and then rates come down. And when they come down, watch out.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to respect your time, but I've got one final question.
Sure.
Okay, so here you go. If you could invite anyone or any two people to be a keynote at a Keller Williams event, living or dead, who would you invite to be a keynote speaker, and what would they bring to the table?
As the person who literally hires the keynote speakers, I've gotten to live this dream. You just saw Tony Robbins and Mel Robbins, and if you came to the CEO, you saw 5 other speakers. All 5 of the speakers at this Family Reunion CEO Summit would have been keynotes at any other industry event. I just want to be really clear. Like, you get 100%. Cody Sanchez and Rory Vaden and Dr. Gabrielle Lawrence. These are people that would keynote anywhere else. So all that aside, living or dead, I would really love to see Dr. Michael Singer deliver a keynote. He wrote the book, The Untethered Soul. He wrote the book, The Surrender Experience. I have offered him untold riches, and he won't do it. I've traveled to him to sit in his living room and hear him speak. I think he would literally levitate on stage. But we can't get him, so you probably won't be seeing him.
Got it.
If I had to pick another one, and again, I would really have to give this some thought, but I don't know that you'd call it a keynote, but if there was any way to sit and listen to Christ in any way, shape, or form, I think that would be one hell of a morning.
Be funny if that was a keynote.
That's right.
Let me tell you the 3 things you need to know.
You say anyone living or dead, it's kind of hard to
not wrap him in there.
Exactly. Not go there.
Yeah.
Jason, thank you for your time. We're grateful for the opportunity to be with you. Any questions, Jason? I'm going to go to Jason. Other Jason, any questions we didn't ask?
What's your favorite book on that shelf right now? I love listening to you talk because I always stare at your shelf the whole time. But if there was one right now, besides the one thing, that doesn't count.
Oh, I don't see any of my favorites on this shelf.
Okay, what's one?
All of the favorites are kept on this side of the desk. I don't know. Can you see them?
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Oh, I love money. I have both exactly what to say. Both those are on my desk right
now. I think Pizza Tiger by Tom Monahan. I think The Alchemist is one of my favorites. Trammell Crow Master Builder, The Untethered Soul. I think everybody should have their stack of books by which the models of their lives are built. And everything else is just everything else.
Yeah.
I'm with you. The Alchemist. There you go.
There it is. That one will change your life.
Yeah. Good stuff. Jason, thank you again. We appreciate your time. Look forward to the next conversation. We will link the show notes to MREA podcast down below. Anything else you want to tell our folks about? Any other KW News information sites we should be paying attention to?
No, I love y'all. Just keep waking up every day and accept my thank you and gratitude. And I'm not saying thank you for everything you've done. I'm more so saying thank you for everything you will do. Because there's an endless number of consumers out there that you will earn the right one day to call clients. Remember, everyone else looks at the populace and thinks of them as customers. But when you think about us, we never say that. We always talk about our clients. And I don't know that you know how special that is. And I think Gary captured it better than anyone could have in the MREA. Not on any single page. It's the page that nobody reads. It's literally the dedication page. And I'll leave you with this. The Millionaire Real Estate Agent is dedicated to the men and women whose hard work and entrepreneurial spirit place them squarely on the front lines of free enterprise. This book is dedicated to real estate agents everywhere. Squarely on the front lines of free enterprise.
Free enterprise.
It's the greatest.
Good place, Dan. Thank you. Be safe. Be well. We'll talk soon.